the time has arrived. We are going to finish Draxus today. Major spoiler, this is what she looks like when she's finished. Enjoy this final video. This is a long one, trying something different with the audio as I'll explain. But yeah, hopefully you enjoy me commentating as I paint in real time. Let's do this. Hey everyone, and welcome to part 5 of Kyria Draxus Masterclass. And this is where we left it last time. And I think it's looking really cool now, the body with all those details done. Absolutely fabulous. And we've left maybe the best part till last, because it's going to be the face. So once the head on there, it's just going to look great. The head's always the focal point. So yeah, I'm actually super excited. 1, to finish a project. But 2, yeah, just the face always makes such a big difference. And of course, we have the base too. So the video is going to be a little bit different today, because I'm going to do the audio as I paint instead of doing the audio separately. So this is just going to be able to make me say my thoughts, that I'm thinking at the time a little bit easier. So it might not seem as polished, and you might hear me doing a few more ums, but let me know what you think of this style video. It feels a bit more candid and natural to me. So yeah, we'll see how this style goes, and we'll get into painting the face. So I am a little bit nervous about doing the face, just because it's so small that it's tricky to film. So I'm going to do my best and hopefully explain what I'm doing anyway, but I will, like I said, do my absolute best to make sure you can see what I'm doing. But if I just move a little bit back and forth, you can see it goes out of focus, so I'm going to try and lock it in. Also, I had this face originally on the miniature, but I found this one from a Stormcast Eternal, actually one of the free Stormcast Eternals you get from Games Workshop. So they're the ones that they give away in their demos, which is great. But I changed to this face because I thought it would be much better for teaching. We've got all the open face to deal with, like the shadow on the cheek and the lips and the nose. And I didn't think we would be missing out, because the side of the head is shaved. I'll still show you how to do that stubble effect that we would get on the skin head. So if you have this face, you'll be able to know how to do the shaved head effect. And this has obviously got some hair. So I looked at loads of faces and I just couldn't find one I like at the time, but I just didn't spot this one. I just think it's spot on. So you can see I've started with the pre-highlight. So I've sprayed the white from one angle, and it's so helpful for faces. You can see it's already identified the shadows. We're going to have this side here more shadow than the left. And the reason I like to do it the most is because I can see the eyes. I mean, these are such small faces that I really struggle to paint the eyes well. And when it's a black primer, I find it really hard to identify and see where the eyeball is. But this black and white primer actually makes it really obvious. Hopefully you can see already, where the eye is. And what we're going to do is get the eye done out the way, because that's going to be the worst bit to do. And there's nothing worse than doing some great skin and not being able to do the eye. You see me do it on some other tutorials like the Corvus Cabal, but I like to get the eye done, horrible bit done, and then we can work on the skin. So when it comes to painting the white of the eye, most of the time we're probably thinking we will use pure white, but often that doesn't look natural. It does depend on the scale of the miniature. So the bigger the miniature, such as a bust, the more I'll pay attention to the colour of this. But when it's a small miniature like this, especially a female face where the eyes are really tiny, actually definition is a priority. So something like pure white is okay, because it's hard enough to get the pupil in the right, space and the right size, let alone have some other colours on there. What I do recommend though is that you maybe take some white and add a tiny bit of a grey, or use something like ivory, which is an off-white, and it will just not look quite so bright. So what I'm going to do first of all is paint some pure ivory over the pre-highlight just to make it nice and crisp and clear, and that'll be the first step. Okay, like I said, it's going to be quite hard to film this face, so I'm going to do my absolute best. I've got pure ivory on the brush, and I'm just going to apply that over the eye as neat as I can. You can see it's very different to the pre-highlight with the airbrush, and that's because we're brushing on some pigment. It's much denser, so it appears brighter, and that's why it's important to do, even though we've sprayed it white. So I'm going to do the same to the other one, but by now my paint will have dried on the tip, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that off cam. So I'm going to paint the pupil now. I'm not going to do any colour because this is just so small. Some people can get colour on there. For me, I'm just going to try and get black, the right size, nice and neat, and hopefully facing the same direction. So we're going to do our best to do it well, and also try and get it on camera. So I'm just going to make sure I have hardly any paint on the brush, and I've got that nice tip. And I'm going to put the pupil in on the eye. Some of these things I'm going to probably have to do not filming. Basically, I hold my face really close to the miniature when I want to paint a crazy detail like this, and my head will get in the way of the camera. So, hopefully you can see me doing it, and if I mess up really bad, then I might have to do some of the details while not filming. So it doesn't look too bad from here, but I might zoom in myself and make sure it's all good. You can see I got some black on the hair there, which doesn't matter because we haven't started it, but that's the reason why I'm getting the eyes done now. So on the palette here I have some Bugman's Glow and some Barracknar Burgundy from Citadel, and what I'm going to do is basically make my darkest kind of shadow colour. So I'm going to take some of the Bugman's and add a little of this Barracknar Burgundy. In fact, I'm just going to mix that in, and that's going to make maybe our darkest tone. If we need it to be darker, we can just add some more burgundy or something else, but we'll try this kind of colour first of all and see how we get on. So what I like to do now is take a dark shadow colour and basically paint it around the eyes, because we need to frame them and make sure we get the eyelids in. So again, I'm taking a very small amount on the brush, and I'm just going to go around the eyes just to frame them. And I'm also going to put it anywhere where I want some shadow. So around the nose here, definitely under the chin and under the lip. Probably all of this kind of shadow side for now. So I might darken all of this. Basically anywhere where the black pre-shade is, you can see how bad the eye looks from that angle. So we need to go and correct that with the hair. That's just where there's paint that's got on the hair there at the side. so when we paint the hair, it will correct it all for us. Good area for shadow here, back of the head, and around the ear. And this can be fairly loose, it doesn't have to be perfect right now, because when we apply the next layer we can neaten everything up. So we're just trying to put some rough shadows in, but the most important thing is to basically go around the eye to make sure we've got the eyes defined and there's a shadow around it. So essentially this is the best job I could do on the eyes. I had to make some changes off camera, and that was just repainting the ivory and having another go at painting the pupil. You know, I knew I wasn't going to get it perfect on camera. It's so hard. I want to hold it so close to my face. And then I've obviously painted quite a lot of shadow around there, and that was just, again, to make fixes and corrections. That's why I got this panda eye effect. But for me, God, I hate painting the eyes. So having them done is a great task to have out the way. Maybe I should have done that on the first masterclass so it was over with. But once we're at this stage, I think the worst is over and we can start working on the skin. You can put the white dot on the pupil, but that is very tricky, and I wasn't even going to try and film that because painting the pupil is hard enough. So that's very, very optional. But if you have great technical skills and you're great with getting a super sharp point on your brush, then I definitely think you should try it. So we're back to the palette now. That was our shadow mix. This is some Bugman's Glow, and this is some Kislev Flesh. Now, Kislev Flesh is a great paint because it layers smooth, but tonally, it's a little yellow. We're going to use it, but we're going to start with it with a tiny bit of Bugman's in, and then we're going to add a little bit of ivory to it, which will kill the yellow a little bit. So the tone is quite nice, but for me it's not perfect. So I'm going to take a small brush full of Bugman's and just add that, and you can see it just makes it slightly peachier. To be honest, you could just use Cadian Flesh instead of this, but I find this to be a little more vibrant, but like I said, it's a little yellow on its own. But we have this kind of nice pink colour, and that's going to form our mid-tone to begin with. So now we're going to base coat this all over the skin. So over the white, this is going to be pretty vibrant, and then when we go over the red areas that we've painted shadow, it's not going to show up so much, but that's okay, we'll build it up. This is just building up the first layer. So you can see me going in and around the eyes, and you can imagine that when this is all neat, it's going to look fantastic. So we're going to just build it up in a nice thin few coats. And we'll come back to the shadow later, but for now we just want to build this up nice and smooth over the whole miniature. Or face rather, it's not a whole miniature, is it? So around the details, like the lips, I'm not going in the recess, I'm just going over the top. And then I'm not too worried about getting it on the hair, but I am being careful around the eye. Still got the panda eyes, but we'll work on that later. So I'm going to go ahead and let that dry and apply a second coat, and then I'll show you what it looks like when that's done. So that's 2 coats, and you can see it already looks tons better, and the eye doesn't look too bad now I've painted around it. Where it's gone over the shadow, it's quite a dull, boring colour. I haven't actually reached full opacity really here on this side. But on the main light side, you can see I've got a really smooth coat in just 2 coats. And that's the other reason we use the pre-highlight. White, for me, makes skin so much easier. Then we don't have to deal with things like coverage. And I always find with skin, it's better to start quite light and, dull it down rather than start dark and work our way up with things like armor. It's very easy to get too much contrast in skin, I find. What I'm going to do before we move on is block in this part here and the hair in, I think, some pure black for now. So hopefully you don't need to watch me do that. I'm just going to base it in black and then we'll see where we're at. So the only thing that's happened here is I've painted the black parts, and what a difference. I can't lie, I was pretty excited getting to this point because I was like, yes, the hard part is over, I was actually nervous filming the eyes and stuff, just because, capturing it on camera I knew was going to be tricky, and painting them is tricky enough without, doing it wrong. But now we're at this point, we have to do shading on the cheek, highlighting on the skin, the stubble and the hair, but I honestly believe that the worst part is done for the face because, we have that eye. And if you really mess it up, at least you can strip it at the beginning and start again, There's a couple corrections I need to make. So I'm going to dilute our shadow mix and just apply it like a little wash in the ear just to get that shading. Check the other side. Yeah, I missed the ear. Then also I need to use the base coat to kind of fix this part around the eye. So just get that in tighter and neater. Build that up. Okay, so what to do now? You can either do some of the details, or what I think I'll do is the highlights for the skin. Then I'll do the stubble, the lips, and then probably the hair and the eyebrows last. So for the highlight colour, we're going to take the Kislev flesh. Of course, this is Kislev with a little bit of Bugman's Glow in, but we're going to skip pure Kislev because we said it's a little yellowish, and we're going to add a tiny bit of ivory in, and that will form our first highlight. So the base mix, which is Kislev and a little Bugman's, and then this is Kislev, and I'm just going to take a tiny bit of ivory. I'm leaving a little Kislev on the corner there so you can just compare the colour. Take a little more and a little water, and what that'll do is desaturate the Kislev, and hopefully it will look a little more natural. Just going to add a little water because I want to build up quite thin layers now. You can see we've just killed the kind of yellowish there. You have to watch you don't add too much because it will be too much of a jump from this colour. If you feel more comfortable, just use the Kislev as the next step, then start adding this. But if you play on the palette, hopefully you can see why we've done this, and it's just to change the tone. Okay, so this is where I'm worrying about keeping in focus. So I'll do my best, and let's try and nail this face. So adding highlights. One of the most important ones is under the eye. So I'm going to start with this one. And I went out of focus a little. And then this highlight's going to work down the face. And then it's also going to come underneath the cheek. And then again over the top. Highlight is also going to go across the forehead here. The whole way at the moment, because we're going to go quite bright on that forehead. Sorry if I'm moving out. Very, very tricky. I think over time I'll get better at filming, but it's quite tricky to hold perfectly still, you know. Filming a tank's not too bad, but when it comes to a face, yeah, quite tricky. Hopefully though, the explanation is what you need, and even though I might go out of focus every now and again, you know, you should be able to see the process. And I think actually the order in which to do things is one of the most important things. I'm actually quite proud of coming up with the idea of spraying white and doing the eyes first, just because for me, it made it tons easier. So I hope that you appreciate why we've done that, and that makes it easier for you. So after that dried, I'm going to do a second layer because it's quite dilute, so I need to make sure it's opaque before I move on. And I'm just changing the shape of that shadow under the cheek, making sure it's natural. And then also beginning to bring out the detail on the nose. And this is really muddy on the forehead, so I need to build that up. Maybe that's going to take 3 layers or something. But it's getting there already, hardly any steps in. Bring that round the chin. Now the shadow side, I'm going to leave a little darker, I think. But for now, let's do the same and paint these highlights. Actually, there's a part here on the nose I missed. That should be the base or maybe the shadow. We can adjust the shadows later and make them darker, so don't worry about it too much right now. So I think I'm going to apply a third layer and then we'll move on to a brighter highlight. So now we have a little more ivory into the mix, so you can just add another small amount and make the correct increment, and we're just going to carry on with the highlighting. So I'm going to start with this one around the cheek and the eye, and that continues to around the mouth. Sorry, moved out of focus. There we go. Then we're going to paint the nose and the side. And we're going to paint the forehead. Look at my brush stroke direction on the forehead and moving it up to the light here. Now this is going to be stubble, so I'm not going to highlight that. The bottom of the cheek, I think that will be a little bit brighter. So I'll move the brush downwards and now I'll loop around. Start to frame that shadow forming on the cheek. It's coming together, it's looking there. See, I made a mistake on the hair there. I've got some skin on that, so I will change that. Don't forget the highlight on the chin. It's going to go around the whole top and the lips here. And then also the so where the hairline is going to be, I think I'll leave that a little bit darker. You can see it already starts to feel a little stubble-like where it's less saturated. Now the side, in the shadow, I'm going to do these parts as highlights and the top of the head here, but the kind of the cheek area, that's going to remain dark, and we'll probably deal with that later. I just want to focus on this main side for now, and all I'm going to do is add some more ivory to make a brighter highlight, and we'll continue to build that up. So I've got a little more ivory added into the mix, and probably got another 1 or 2 highlights to go. Now you may be wondering why we're using ivory and not a skin paint or already mixed one, but the reason is that I find a lot of the skin highlights are unpredictable, and they go a little chalky, and they just don't seem to work. Ivory is really reliable, and we've used it for pretty much all the highlighting on the model so far. And the other thing is, it actually desaturates the Kislev flesh, so it kills the colour. And that's actually something I want, because I imagine this Inquisitor, you know, doesn't go on holiday sunbathing much. I want her flesh to be not dead like an undead person, but I don't want it to have loads and loads of colour in it. So we're focusing more on the volume and getting the highlights in the right place. I will say, looking at it in the hand and then on the monitor, it is more pink and colourful than it appears to me on the monitor, and you'll see when you paint it yourself. If you do want it to be more saturated, then, you know, just use some lighter skin colours like salmon skin rose or something. But anyway, adding brighter highlights. So more ivory added, and now I'm going to do quite concentrated highlights. So I'm going to follow the shape of the forehead and build a little circle here where the light's going to hit it. I'm going to detail the nose, and as always get that highlight around the cheek area. And definitely above the chin. Not going to go along the jawline now, we're just building highlights around this main area, and because we're doing it asymmetrical with loads of light on this side of the face and it's going to be darker here, we really do need to concentrate on just this section here. So I'm probably going to apply another layer of exactly the same highlight in the same way, and as you can see there's not loads of contrast, so we'll add some more ivory until we have enough contrast basically. I'm guessing it's going to be 1 to 2 more steps. So essentially more of the same, and this is the bit I actually enjoy, building up the highlights, because we're only working in a small area and it starts to look cool as we build up the contrast. So I'm just moving the highlight to the top of the head. Just always remember the shape of the head is like a sphere, so you imagine if the light's hitting there, the hair interrupts it, but it would be kind of a circle shape here that, yeah, just the hair stops, and we'll make sure when we highlight the hair it matches up with that. And I keep messing this highlight up on cam, but around the cheek and up in the eye. There we go. Almost finished, I think, on the highlighting. I'm going to add a little more ivory and do our last one. Okay, so I think this is going to be the final highlight. Depends what it looks like. I think that's bright enough. That looks pretty nice. You can push the contrast as much as you like. You can go really bright here in this point where it's catching light. But yeah, you can just carry on with the ivory, or even some ice yellow or something like that. I'm going to come to the other side shortly, but actually how dark it is cool because that's going to be dropped into the shadow. I'm really just concerned about this side. Actually, that hair forms quite a nice divide where there's going to be the shadow anyway. So yeah, I'm going to check it over, make sure there's no mistakes, tidy up bits like around these lips. That's quite tricky. I need to look at that very closely, but quite nice. And I hope you don't mind the tone of the skin. Very simple recipe with just ivory added to the Kislev, but we're going to add some other little colors shortly, and in other tutorials we'll do more complex recipes, but I think, you know, you've got to just be able to paint it neatly and with a simple recipe first, and then you can play more around with different tones. So to finish the highlights, I'm going to add a final light spot right at the top of the forehead, just to draw lots of attention to this area, under the cheek, the nose, and the chin. Just those kind of key areas really to draw all the attention to it. You can see the shadow under the cheek has been formed quite nicely by just leaving the previous layers behind. But what we're going to do is just add a little more colour into that and smooth it out at the same time. Then we can work on the lips and the stubble and all those elements, but we're almost there on the skin. So we have our previous mix here of the shadow, and this is what's in the shadow of the cheek right now. This is the Kislev with a little bit of the darker colour, the Bugman's Glow. So what we're going to do is take some of this corn red and just add a very small amount, because it will change quite drastically, and just have a slightly redder colour. And this can be the shadow for the cheek and also the base coat for the lips. So very carefully, because this is quite a strong colour, just add a little more red to the cheek. And you can also base the lips. At the same time. Now if you make a mistake and you make the cheek a little strong like this, you can take your previous colours, nice and diluted, and just fade that out. There we go. I think that's maybe a little too much contrast. So you could actually soften that. Maybe I just added a little too much corn red. This is where you need to be careful and experiment. But you know what? It's quite a small head and it will just show up quite nicely. So yeah, I think we'll leave that. Now what we're going to do is add a little bit of ivory to that reddish mix and use it to highlight the lips. So I'm just going to focus on the bottom lip because that's what's going to catch the highlight. And I'm also going to just have the highlight on one side. So just like that, ever so light, and that is tricky to do. I actually think that's enough. On a larger figure, I will put multiple highlights, but as you can see, I've kind of highlighted the lip quite nicely there. I could do it brighter, but judging that, I think that looks pretty good. You know, I just said all that, but let's add a tiny little bit of a brighter highlight, but just in line with that forehead highlight, a little bit brighter. Nice. Yeah, that looks really cool on the lip now. It's really coming together actually. So we kind of just have to deal with the hair elements. You can see there's almost a stubble look from where we haven't painted it and we've just left it behind, and you could leave it at that, but I think we'll add a touch of grey just to finish it off. And then we have the hair and the eyebrows, of course. We have to deal with the shadow side, but we'll leave that till the end. To be honest, once the stubble's done, it'll look okay, and we'll just finish it off. For the stubble, I have some scale 75 graphite grey here, and I don't use many scale 75 colours, but I've just found that this grey is fantastic for stubble. It's quite warm, it's the right value as in it's not too dark, and I just like it. So we have some Kislev flesh here, and I'm just going to take a dot of that grey. A little more. Don't want it to be too grey, and quite a decent amount of water, because we're basically going to make this kind of grey glaze, and that's what's going to form the stubble. I'm going to make a slightly darker one in case I need it. Now we're going to take that glaze and I'm going to brush away from the highlights so I don't mess them up. And as you can see, we're looking to make fresh stubble, so the older you want it, as in how many days it's been since a shave, the more of the graphite you can add. So I only added a tiny bit, so it's like she's just kind of buzzed it off. The important thing is to gradually build up the glaze and move the brush away from your lights. That way you're not going to mess them up. And doing it with a glaze means you can do it gradually and you won't get like just a strong grey line basically. And I would start the hairline too far back, and then you can always bring it forward and adjust it. Now I've got the darker one mixed because that can form the stubble in the shadow. So this part here at the back, that's going to be a little greyer where it's darker. In fact, I quite like the look of that grey. So I'm just going to make this stubble effect a little more obvious. I do exactly the same on the other side, and it will come out darker naturally just because we have that pre-highlight there. So just adding the glazes, you can see it looks pretty good. Actually, the dark side is looking fine. Remember, it's really not in view that much. What I need to do is fix the shape of this cheek highlight. So I'm going to take some of my shadow colour from earlier, which was the Bugman's Glow with a little bit of the burgundy in, and just adjust that now. So it's not looking quite right, so I'll just tidy that up with some of the base colour. I'm going to work some more on the shadow side and just smooth it out by using the original base coat, which was the Bugman's mixed with a little Baragnar. And I think I just need to add a little more Baragnar to that to shadow the cheek, and that's probably going to be enough, because don't forget this is mostly hidden by the collar. So we want to detail it, but we don't need to go crazy over it. It's more about the main side and the overall look. So just like the other side, I draw on that shadow shape. And you can keep adding shadow until you're happy. I also think this ear needs a bit of correction. But we managed to pretty much do most of this side in the first few stages. We just don't continue with the rest of them. Does still need some fixes. Maybe even a slightly darker mix. There we go. That's cool now on the shadow side. I might glue it in and adjust it if it doesn't look quite right. So we'll finish off now, I think, with eyebrows and the hair. So the eyebrows we're going to paint in with Rhinox hide, and I have no idea how I'm going to get these correct and film. So maybe this filming is going to be a bit dodgy, but I can't mess the eyebrows up. So maybe if I angle it like this. Oh, here we go. So I'm going to make sure there's hardly anything on the brush. Whew. Okay. So they're too chunky. Curse of the camera. So I just need to go back with my highlight colour and correct those. Oh dear. So you're not going to do this, you're going to get it right first time, but you're probably not going to be filming. So at this point where it's looking almost done, I kind of managed to fix the eyebrows. Oh, that was probably one of the worst things I've had to do on camera now. But I'm going to finish the hair in the model, and that's just to make sure we definitely get that highlight in the right position. I mean, I've already done it on the forehead, so I kind of have to follow that, but we'll just make sure it's in the right place. Also, I'm probably going to have to manhandle it a bit, so I'll just, now I've done most of the work, I'll finish it in the body. So quite exciting. Let's see what it looks like. So there you go. I have to say, I tried filming putting it in, and it went very wrong twice. So I had to do it with the camera off. Yeah, it was horrible. It just wouldn't fit. I chipped a tiny bit of the paint, which I'll fix. But we haven't done the hair yet. But man, that's cool. We haven't even done the base yet. Finished the hair, but I'm already kind of excited. This is like the point you get to, right? So yeah, let's get that hair done. So I think that's looking pretty great with the face in there now. We have the hair to do, as you can see, and I definitely think it's much easier to just finish all this in the model. As I turn it, you can see why I was saying we don't need to go crazy with lots of attention on the shadow side, because it is covered by all of this. You can see it, so it still needs to be detailed, but we want it to be dark. This side is all the shadow, and then all the light here is on this side of the face. So I'm going to paint the hair in a blue-black, and for that I'm going to be using Citadel Stegadon Scale Green, and then I'm just going to add some ivory to that for the highlights. So really simple. I know it says green, but it's a blue. So this is a great paint for doing any kind of blue-black. So I'm going to begin by placing a large area of Stegadon Scale Green around where all the light's going to be here on the head. I'm not actually going to paint each strand of hair individually, because if we highlight strands of hair back here, it won't have the overall effect of some strong light on it. This is a different style, and you might prefer to paint all the individual strands, but I'm basically just going to put a load of light here on the hair to have a kind of exaggerated light effect. And I'm going to pick out the individual strand on the front here in the blue and some of the hairs here. Maybe the bun at the back will get a couple. Now I'll add some ivory to that and we'll move on to the next step. So already I'm liking how that blue-black is shaping out on the hair. We're going to cover a lot of the blue with the paler colour so it won't look so blue, but it will be as part of the transition. And now I'm going to focus the highlight in a smaller area. And now I'll start to pick out some of the strands of hair. We want this to look shiny, so we're going to paint a very small, tight highlight. If we highlight a long way across, it will make it look softer or not as shiny. And I'm going to put highlights just at the tops of these individual strands. So we just need to make sure that this stays lined up. So I'm going to bring that highlight down. Okay, we're ready for the brighter colour now. So now I'm going to focus on a very small area. Try and do the lines as fine as I can. And again, just at the top of here. And we can also focus the highlights so they're more around this part. So there'll also be a transition from like here to here across the head, because we're trying to make a sphere kind of shape. You can see it's forming around here. And we're doing that with the highlight on the face as well as the hair. So I think we're going to do, yeah, 1 or 2 more highlights on the hair and it'll be done. Now, trying to do my smallest little highlights. Picking out the individual hairs and just centralizing that light around there. Something like that. So if we take a step back, you can see we have a nice shine around the head. If you make any mistakes, you can take some black or blue and glaze and fix it that way. So you can see we've got more light on this side of the hair, and again it goes into shadow there. We could highlight the bun maybe, I'll do that. Just a couple little highlights, but honestly I want to leave the back of their hair here plain black, so it just really exaggerates that effect. And then having all these lights around here and then matching them with the head gives a very dramatic look. So yeah, I think I'm going to check that over, but that's the face finished. So I guess we'll move on to the base. She looks really cool now. I'm glad I did this head swap. I love the half-shaved head and the hair. It's a really good head, actually. So, on to the base. Final hurdle now. I can't believe it. I've got that excitement myself, because I know once I've painted this base, I get to glue the miniature on, and that's just always a great feeling. And once everything's together, it changes everything, and sometimes there's parts you're not happy with, but once it's all together, it's actually easy to forget about those because you see the piece in one. So with the base, I've sprayed this Chaos Black quite a few times to get a smooth finish on the plinth. So what I'm going to do, I think, is wear a glove so I can handle this and not ruin the sides, and just try and paint this in one session, and then this black will stay nice and black. But yeah, it's not going to take long to paint the base. I am going to do it in the same way as my Necron Overlord, and that's because I want these to match. They're supposed to be a pair, so I think when they're together they'll look fantastic. But obviously we had a PDF before, so maybe watching me do it in video is helpful too. So what I want to do is use all the overhangs we created in the sculpt to get a very dramatic shadow. So this is obviously Chaos Black spray, and I want to leave that Chaos Black spray here so it matches the finish of the sides. Having black shadows isn't always a good idea, but because it's the base, I do really want to create this kind of drama and have, yeah, very, very dark shadows. So I've got the olive brown on the brush. I'm using a very large brush, and I am trying to do a kind of more sketchy style on this base. I don't want it to be pristine, so I've got a very big size 3 brush, and I'm just going to paint any surfaces that face upwards in this olive brown. And we can have the paint reasonably dilute, just so it flows nicely. So you can see any area facing down, I'm going to leave that black, and this is going to make painting the base very fast, but it should look fantastic. But I quite like having the base less detailed. You might want to paint your base with more detail and define all the rocks, but I enjoy the aesthetic, and I actually enjoy the process of just painting quite loose. Also, after painting so precisely on that on the miniature itself, so it's actually quite nice to have a contrast and paint in this way. So the top, you can see I'm just going to do rough brush strokes. I know this is where the feet are going, but it doesn't matter if paint goes over that or not. When we build up the other layers, there'll be more texture on the top here, but for now I'm just doing this loose brown, and I can combine some sort of stippling motions just to get different strokes and effects. And this olive brown's quite light to begin with. You may prefer to actually mix a little black with it, and it won't be as sudden a jump. And I think the bottom of that looks a little plain, so I'm just going to add some little lines like that. And actually my brush is split, but I don't mind that. I'm just going to use the split to my advantage and have some quick scratches and things. Okay, so we need to let that dry, and then we'll move on to the next step. You can see from above, all of this that you can see is going to be brown because this is where the light's coming in, and then when we turn it up, all those parts should remain the black. So now I've moved on to Skaven Blight Dinge, which is a lovely grey I like to use for rocks from Citadel. I advise you to add a little bit of the previous colour to it, so just a dot of the brown will make it a little more natural, and it will help with the kind of transition to the two. So what we're going to do is basically have more detail and more light as we go higher up, because we want to draw the eye upwards. So I'm going to put a couple highlights here at the bottom, but not much. I'm going to really focus on moving higher up around here. Again, leaving all that black. Now the top surface, I want quite a lot of this Skaven Blight Dinge because this is going to catch the most light. The brown will help underneath to build up different tones, but we can almost cover it. And again, I'm being rough and just having fun with my brush strokes because it will just build up fun texture. This look probably wouldn't work for something like Golden Demon, because they want things to be neat and pristine. That's what that paint competition's all about. So this is very much a stylistic choice that I'm going for, that I enjoy. So I'm covering most of this brown up, but it's very important to have those brown tones somewhere. Helps make it feel more natural. If we just use pure greys, it doesn't really work. So I'll just catch some of these areas that face up. And I think we're almost ready for a lighter colour. So I'm using Scale 75 Graphite next, the same paint we used for the stubble, and I love this grey because it's so matte and warm, as I said before, so it works really well for rocks. I am not using it on its own, I'm just basically adding it to my previous mix, so I'm being quite dirty with all the colours we're using, so every time I add a new colour, I'm just adding it to the palette. So we've got the brown olive, we've got the Skaven Blight Dinge, and now we've added some graphite. And it just makes sure the colours aren't pure and it keeps them desaturated, and that's what we want for the base. We want it to be quite dirty and desaturated, otherwise it's going to distract from the model. So anyway, we have this kind of brownish grey, and now I'm really going to work higher up. I don't want the attention to be lower down, so I think I'll add some small highlights to somewhere like here. But really my focus is going to be on the parts higher up. It's actually really nice to paint like this. I'm doing this directly after filming the face, which was having to be super precise, both in the painting and the filming, and then this is just totally the opposite. So it's actually really enjoyable and relaxing painting. You can see where I'm pushing the paint right up against the kind of recesses and just trying to hit all those surfaces that are close to horizontal, really. That's basically what we're trying to do, is add light higher up, and whenever the surface is closer to horizontal, it's going to catch more light, so we put a highlight there. So this top part here, you can see this will have some of this colour, and then later when we go lighter, we'll add some more to the top. So I'm using it quite dilute, so the texture or the different brush strokes we're doing doesn't build up physical texture on the surface. It's just going to still be smooth, but we're going to have different brush strokes. And you can build this up in layers, and if there's parts that look bad, just go over it again. But just make sure you judge it after it's dried, because it will look different. But painting in this rough way really works with layering, because everything you do just adds more interest and it all builds on top of each other. And I know this works because it turned out really well for the Necrons, so just got to have a bit of faith. So that's looking cool now. I love how the light is here in the top parts of the rocks, so I'm going to just have a few more of those. Good part in there actually. And then here Remember, our light source is coming from this direction, the left. So this surface here and any facing that way, I will keep a little darker and just make sure it matches up with that chest highlight as always. This brush has been splitting quite badly, so I might have to give it a bit of a wash, but for this rough work that's okay. I can just about cope. And this top layer is dry, so I'm just going to add some more rough strokes. Just every layer is making this look better and better. Okay. So we're back to the palette here, just so I can show you what I mean about we're just always adding colours to it. So that was my original brown olive, and I added the Skaven Blight Dinge in here, and then I added the graphite, and now we're going to use some Gauss Blaster green. Now we've got to be careful with this so it doesn't go too green, but basically this is going to add some kind of eerie light. I'm imagining we're on some kind of Necron-y world, so I just want this little green touch to it. So I'm just going to add a blob. And you can see it doesn't turn it green instantly, but we get this kind of dirty-ish grey. Just going to add a little more. And I think I'll make another highlight as well. So I have a couple options. I don't want to go any lighter than that. So this is going to be the last two steps if I need to do them. So these last two we're going to be very reserved with. So we're just going to really save it for up the top here. And really more detailing now, so just picking out the odd part. I'm not going to go lower than this part, it's all going to be reserved for the kind of top surface. And all the little rocks like this, I'm just going to hit the surfaces that face towards the light. So that little crevice there is cool, and here definitely. I'll be quite reserved to start with because I don't know how bright it's going to look. Don't want this base to be too light because it will take away from the atmosphere. We want it to be evil, like Skeletor. You can tell it's getting late, or I've been painting this miniature for a long time. So you can see I haven't got too much on the brush, so I can just build up this texture with care. But I actually think painting in this rough style adds to it. Makes me feel all arty, which is what we want. So I know the feet are here, so I'm just kind of doing some light like that. If I was really clever, I could put the miniature on and paint some projected shadows, but that's coming in a future tutorial. Okay, just taking a step back and seeing how that looks. So that was the first highlight colour we made, so I'm moving to that brighter one now. And I've got to be careful with this because it's quite green. And it's also quite light, as you can see. But it does look cool. So we've gone from like an earthy brown through some dirty greys, and we've got a green. So we've actually got quite a lot of colour contrast here, which is what makes it interesting. I think, I always struggled painting rocks because I would just go dark grey, medium grey, light grey, and wondered why it just didn't look good. And you really just need to go through some colour variation through the transition. Using earthy browns, using greens, just helps make it all feel more natural and more interesting. And it means you need to rely less on value contrast, light and dark, because you're getting more contrast via your colour. So I'm just judging this now. Have I got enough? Don't want to go too much. I have a habit of over highlighting things and it looks better in previous steps, so that's something I'm working on myself, trying to just rein it back, or even just sit on things for a while, and if it needs more highlights then can do it later on. But I'm thinking that this is looking cool so far. I'm going to add more bright light to the horizontal surface. I'm going to rub some paint off my brush so I get more texture. You could actually use a dry brush for this and stipple. I just like using the same brush for everything. I'm being careful with it, it's diluted paint, so even though it looks like I'm being rough, I'm not going to damage the brush like this. I'm just moving it fast and not in a particular way. Okay. I think that's done. I'm going to paint the scarab, and for the scarab I'm going to paint it the same way in the PDF for the Necron, so hopefully you don't mind that it's not going to be in the video footage, but it's just going to be highlighted with some greys and just a little green gem in the middle. But yeah, it's in the PDF, and that'll be much better quality in terms of photo size, so we'll follow that for the scarab, and then we'll put the miniature on, and then we'll see if we need to make any changes to the base. So I'm going to go ahead and do that scarab. So after painting the scarab, spoiler, in the same way as the previous base I did, I decided that this has a couple more highlights and detail that this is lacking. So I'm going to switch to my detail brush, add a little more of the green and maybe a little bit of some ivory, and just start adding a couple little details. So just pick out some of the parts on the rock. So now I'm being more precise. But all that rough work from earlier has kind of paid off because we have a nice loose aesthetic. And now we just finish it with some precise, small, bright brush strokes, just to get some final lights. And you can see the impact just that little light on that rock has had. Just finishes everything. Trying not to rush, because I know as soon as I've done this I get to glue it on, and that's going to be great, but I need to make sure that this base looks cool. I have quite a bad habit of doing that, just seeing the end and getting excited. I'm sure we all do that. And then, even though this is flat, I'm going to add some careful dots and scratches. Again, it looks like I'm being rough with the brush, but I'm actually being quite gentle. We'll spread the bristles apart a little, but it's not going to ruin the brush. As long as we don't get paint in the ferrule, the brush will be fine. But I need this to be random texture, so I like to paint in this way. You can use an old brush if you want. Okay, I think that's the light we needed, so I'll start a new clip, but I think it's gluing time. So I've removed the miniature from my painting cork, which was quite eventful, but we didn't film that one. So I'm just going to check that it fits with a dry fit. Don't want to spoil the surprise. Yeah, that looks like it's going to be okay. So here we go. I'm not putting loads of glue on here just for any reason. I need to remove it, any mistakes or something. I think that fits. Well, I'm going to let that dry and then we can take a look. There we go. What a beauty. One final thing is we need to tie in this rock with the rest. So I'm just going to take my highlight colours. Make sure that works. But it's cool actually because that rock really fits in with the rest. Obviously that's the one that came on it. The base is quite plain. We could add some more stuff to it, but I quite like how it's just a barren wasteland. So maybe I'll work and do some more highlights on that. I think it's always best to come back to it after a day or so to make corrections. So maybe I can change some parts I don't like in a day or two, but there we go. For me, it's been quite a journey. I think this has been 5 or 6 weeks, and actually painting a miniature to this standard in that amount of time has been intense. Not in a bad way, but I've had to make sure I paint every week. You know, sometimes normal life gets in the way and I don't pick up a brush at all, but because I'm committed to doing these tutorials, I've had to get something done every week, and that's been cool because, you know, I've got this miniature which has turned out really well. Yeah, I quite like how bleak this looks with her nice colours on the top, and I like that dead flat surface as well. Kind of suggests that there's more and she's on some kind of cliff face. You can see how we paint less with less highlights down here. It draws the eye to the top. But yeah, I'm pleased with that. Now I've got my Overlord here, which is supposed to be the matching miniature, and that is cool. I'm super pumped on that. I really wanted these to match. We've kind of got those, you know, the same palette with the purple, just a different type of purple, and we've got that emerald. Obviously this is all gold and this only has a tiny bit, but I love how they match, and it represents a time when, you know, these 40k models came out the same period, and it also, I believe, they're kind of part of a similar backstory. So for me, having them matching is really awesome. It'll remind me of this kind of period of painting and also doing these tutorials. So I'm going to take some nice photos of this and we can have a little look at that and maybe talk about it some more. But yeah, what a great feeling. I'm gonna love having these two displayed together on the shelf, and hopefully people get it that they match, and yeah, they look pretty on their plinths. So this is a little afterword. It's actually 2 days after I finished filming it, so it's always nice to just sit and think for a little while before talking about a miniature and making a judgment. But yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for following along. This is the first really in-depth masterclass we've done for the Cult of Paint Patreon. Obviously we've done the PDF guides, which have been full models to a high standard, and we've done many videos, but this has been the most I've videoed a figure, and I feel I've learnt lots about filming along the way, and hopefully starting to get better at capturing really detailed images so it's clear for you to see how I'm doing what I'm doing. And I've also experimented a little, and the last video, this video, I definitely enjoyed more because I preferred commentating as I went. It just felt way more natural, and you know, I've always got feelings at the time that I might forget to say when doing the audio separately. The audio wasn't perfect, so what I'm going to do is invest in a microphone to make that consistent, but hopefully you're happy for me to annotate or talk as I paint. If I can just improve that audio, I'd love your feedback on that. It's quite important to me because I'm only doing these videos so that you get some really fantastic tutorials, and hopefully you can see, you know, the passion and the effort I'm putting in. I just want to paint some awesome models and show you how to do them in the best possible way. But this is the first masterclass, and I'm sure there'll be many more. And yeah, hopefully they'll get better every time. I hope you learnt a bunch from this model, even if you don't paint this specific model. I think it's been a really cool one to learn some different parts on. But yeah, I'm really happy with the outcome, and although I haven't learnt lots from painting, I just feel it's been really fantastic to learn how to do these tutorials, and as somebody who's passionate about doing this teaching in miniature painting, that's really important to me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your finished versions, and please, you can give me feedback by popping me a message, but I'm more than happy for your feedback to be public, so stick it in the comments on Patreon what we can do to improve these videos, and I'll continue to work on it. But until then, enjoy your painting.